Continuing with Part 2, we'll take a look at Sweden's truly distinctive tank projects, from the crane tank to minimalist, turretless designs that used hydraulic cylinders to lower themselves into cover for ambushes in a remarkably unique way. Heavy tank. A heavy tank prototype developed by the Swedish Army under the Emil program in the 1950s, it featured a strong turret, a thinner hull armor layout for improved mobility, and a 105mm gun with a 3-round magazine autoloader for a high rate of fire. A design sketch appeared in 1951, but development was halted in favor of later variants, one of Bofors' many projects from the late 1970s. This concept was intended to incorporate several bold engineering solutions. It featured a complex split autoloading system. The projectiles were stored beneath the turret on the right side, while the propellant charges were fed from the rear via a belt mechanism. The vehicle was planned to mount a 120mm smoothbore gun and have armor protection up to 260mm, but no real prototype was ever built. A heavy tank variant developed under the 1949 requirement. In 1952, 3 heavy tank projects were proposed, and Emil 1952E2 was the second version. Depending on armor layout and engine choice, its weight was expected to range from 34 to 39 tons. However, by late 1952, development of the E2 was stopped in favor of the E3 variant, which had similar characteristics but better protection. In the mid-1950s, Sweden purchased a number of Centurion Mk3 tanks from the United Kingdom. Around the same time, while developing its own KRV project, Sweden decided to combine the existing KRV chassis with a Centurion Mk10 turret. Construction began in June 1959, but the project was cancelled due to high production costs, and Sweden continued buying British vehicles instead. A new tank project for the Swedish Army, launched in 1949, for secrecy. It was given the unusual name KRV, short for the Swedish term meaning self-propelled crane. The project was based on the French AMX-50 concept. A light chassis was built and tested, and a turreted mock-up was also completed. However, no fully completed prototype was ever produced. Tank destroyer. A Swedish tank destroyer project developed in 1939 on the basis of the L120 light tank. The PVL VVFM-42 never entered service and existed only as a single prototype. After World War II, Sweden faced a serious shortage of light armored vehicles to provide infantry fire support. For this reason, Landsverk developed the IKV-72 infantry assault gun. A total of 36 vehicles entered service before 1954. Between 1956 and 1958, they were rearmed with a more powerful 105mm gun and remained in service into the mid-1970s. Under the designation IKV-102, a Swedish assault self-propelled gun, the SAV M43, was developed between 1941 and 1944. In March 1944, Scania Vabis received an order to produce 36 vehicles. The first 18 were convergents from the Sturv M41C, initially armed with a 75mm gun. All vehicles were rearmed with a 105mm gun in March 1946. A total of 36 SAV M43s were built and remained in service until 1973. In 1956, production began on a modernized version of the IKV-102 assault gun, designated IKV-103. These vehicles were intended to provide fire support for infantry. Around 80 were built, and they remained in service until the early 1980s. In the mid-1960s, Sweden's Ministry of Defense issued requirements for a new tank destroyer. The vehicle was expected to be highly mobile and armed with a powerful gun effective against modern generation tanks, while also supporting infantry on the battlefield. Landsverk developed several proposals, including both fully rotating turrets and fixed guns mounted in the upper hull. However, the program was halted at the sketch and mock-up stage. A project by Bofors, developed in 1965 to 1966, as part of the competition to create a light tank meeting. Swedish Ministry of Defense requirements. The vehicle was planned to mount a 9 cm Bofors L-53 gun and reach 65 km per hour, making it effective against modern generation tanks and useful for infantry support on the battlefield. The design was completed in January 1966, and further work was planned. However, no prototype was ever produced. Developed in the early 1970s through cooperation between the UDES research group and the companies Bofors and Hägglunds. In 1972, Bofors presented a fairly detailed proposal. Later, the decision was made to return to a fully rotating turret concept, and development continued within the UDES 14 program instead. As a result, the Bofors proposal remained only on paper as drawings. Development of a modern tank for the Swedish Army was led by Sven Berge. The first drafts of this unique vehicle appeared in 1956. By 1961, the design phase was completed, along with a wooden mock-up. Later, the first Sturv S1 prototype was built and tested with a new suspension track system that allowed the fixed main gun to be aimed in elevation. The Sturv S2 prototype was developed from late 1962. Both prototypes became the core foundation for the series production of the Sturv 103. In 1960, Bofors successfully secured an agreement to produce a turretless armored vehicle. A total of 10 Series 0 prototypes were built. They differed from the production Sturv 103 in having weaker armor and a less powerful engine, as well as a different commander's cupola. In 1964, these vehicles served as the basis for developing the Sturv 103A. In the 1970s, Sweden developed several unique armored concepts, one of which was Stridsvagn 120. Bofors engineers envisioned it as a lighter version of the Sturv 103, a 20-ton, turretless tank with the ability to elevate and depress its gun. However, the Army ultimately favored a fully rotating turret design, and Stridsvagn 120 remained only on paper as drawings. Developed between 1969 and 1971 to modernize the Sturv 103, unlike the earlier Sturv 103A, the STRV 103B was fitted with a gas turbine engine, a laser rangefinder, and infrared equipment. It also included specialized fittings for deep weighting. In 1970, 220 vehicles entered service, and older variants were converted to the 103B standard, as well, bringing the total to 290 by 1971. This vehicle was developed between 1967 and 1975 as a planned replacement for the STRV 103. It was intended to mount a 105mm gun, a Boeing gas turbine engine, a laser rangefinder, and an infrared sight mounted on a flexible mast. By 1975, the prototype documentation was complete. But, after evaluation, the Army cancelled the project and continued with the already fielded Sturv 103 instead.